Well, okay, it is 6 o'clock, and we actually have a quorum. So we can start. There he is. We were just about to start, so I'm gonna hand it over to City Manager. We're calling it to order. It is 6 o'clock. Cheryl, are you taking notes for?
Kelda will be.
Pardon me?
Kelda will take the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, the first item is the marijuana licensing and application process. And as you all recall, at your last council meeting, you did vote to extend the sunset for 1 year. And Jill, the planner, had provided a very rough draft of a proposed timeline. And what part of the council request was to kind of look at what that process is going to be, and I guess just have some additional input relative to that overall process. And if you take note on that initial draft, it says in August for council to provide general direction on the types of marijuana facilities envisioned and anticipated concerns, if any, about impacts to the community that may need to be mitigated.
So looking at the timeline that was provided to us from the marijuana committee, we are actually, if I'm wrong, we are at number 2 for September, because the types of marijuana facilities have been envisioned, and they've included that in their findings, and the anticipated concerns also was included in their findings, if I'm not mistaken.
I think there's still, at least my understanding is there's still some stuff to talk about there in terms of, you know, they recommended the types and the number, but we as council haven't talked about, you know, whether or not we accepted that, you know, for each type, is that the number that we want? You know, do we want those types? So they made the recommendation, and I think we still really haven't talked about that level of detail yet. And I think that's what step 1 is in the timeline.
Did they
Okay,
make those recommendations based on any locations? I don't know if we got that far yet. Were there any locations?
No.
Recommendations of
Hello,
locations?
everyone. No, we didn't get that far yet. So that's what that's part of what we should figure out.
Okay, yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think that the locations are probably more lower, where we have to work through the ordinance first, is know what can be near the facilities. No, first of all, we need to figure out what facilities or what type of facilities we're even considering, and then about the ordinance of where they can be located near. And then that will give us an idea of where they can be located. So
well, for me, it's difficult to vote on. I mean, if we're making a decision before to understand potential locations. So it may be not as important as writing the ordinance, but I don't think it's low, because that's the main concern when I talk to residents. That's even their main concern. It certainly is mine too. So I don't want us to think that it's low, but I do understand there's priority and steps that we have to do.
I don't think she's saying it's low priority. I think she was saying it's lower on the timeline. Is that right, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm going through the timeline, and the way that the timeline from our planner is laid out is the fact is that we're going to go through what's envisioned first, and then trying to put the ordinance around it, and then we can go into where the locations are. We can't put the locations in place first and then build around it. That's how the way that I see that the planners have gotten it. So going back to the type of facilities.
Let me add something really quick before you go further. So I do understand that you have to put an ordinance in place before you talk about locations. So my question is before we make a decision, all of that will be considered, the location, the ordinance, and that's what I want to understand.
I didn't understand the question. Well,
So
that is going to be a component of, and that's actually right off the bat here, types of facilities envisioned and then anticipated concerns. So if one of the concerns is that we don't want a facility within X number of feet of a school or a playground, or we want them so far from residential properties, those are concerns that Jill and I need to know about up front so that when we are drafting the ordinance can reflect that. We're not going to be able to identify specific parcels that are ideal for these types of businesses. Obviously, that's up to the individual property owners, but we can create an ideal zoning district or where we want to see them in the community based on those anticipated concerns. So it's all part of that initial and Bruce is correct. I mean, while we did get, the council did get feedback from the subcommittee, we haven't heard directly from council how many and what type of these facilities are they envisioning, at least initially. Again, this is something that can be amended in the future, but that it's easier to, and I think I made the point last month was, or at last meeting last week was that it's easier to expand and add more licenses down the road if it's going well than it is to start out with 10 licenses of various types and then try to take them away. So, my recommendation would be to maybe test the waters with one or two and see how that goes and if that's a good fit for the community or not. And then if it is and it's going well, then expand on that. So I've already I had a couple discussions last week with some individuals that are in the business, and they tend to agree with that, at least for our community, that maybe a 1 to 2 would be good starting point, and then see where it goes from there. So
It's a good approach. Can I expand on that conversation? So sorry about that, Bruce. Didn't mean to cut you off. So if you're starting with 2 as a minimum, right? I would recommend that we don't put them in the same area because you're basically going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul. And in every case that we've looked at, we're talking Hazel Park and Walled Lake and River Rouge and Madison Heights. Well, Madison Heights may be a good example, but Hazel Park is a perfect example where you have on one street, you have a couple of them there. And they're kind of just, kind of siphoning off one to get to the other. I figure if you're going to have 2, don't let it be in the same area because it's, number one, you're going to have huge congestion. So you have to manage that. And number 2, you're going to kill both businesses just by having it in the same area.
So question real quick, aren't we jumping the gun when we didn't even get to the marijuana facilities that have been envisioned? I mean, we haven't even started that yet. So that's what I was trying to say from the very beginning. We all go to the initial draft timeline of what was sent out to us. We can start there because then, I think that organically it'll flow into how many, where they should be if we follow the actual timeline.
Okay, I agree with that. I agree. I dove in because I came late. I apologize. So
no worries.
That's what I was going to say, Kelly. I was just going to support you on that. Why don't, I mean, would it make sense to turn to page 4 and just walk down those, those different business types and talk about them one by one and let that lead the discussion?
So I think that's a great idea, and I think that what I would like to do is, because Ian and Salim were the leaders of the committee, just to go through these so we are all under the understanding of which ones, what they are, in layman terms. So I'll hand it over to you, Salim.
Okay, so yeah, no problem. So we've got the list of facilities here. So a processing facility. And Ian, feel free to chime in as well. But processing basically is a facility that takes the plants and processes it into other forms, which should be products that can be sold eventually. But they process it into smokables or edibles, oils, those kind of products. So a processing facility is, I think it has to be a decent size. Do you have a feel for the square footage on those, Ian?
Yeah, 3,500 at a minimum.
Yeah, I was gonna say 3 to 5,000 square feet. I think is what we mostly saw. You know, those, so that, you know, I guess we were thinking we would have a license for that, potentially, but, you know, it's a business. It's not a retail business. You know, they don't have a lot of cash on hand there, but they'll have, you know, some of the product that they're processing. So that's what that type of facility is.
But they will, Celine, but that's also of the various business types. That's also the most risky, though, isn't it? Because it also has a lot of chemicals on site. It probably has a bigger risk of fire than some of the other businesses, business types.
Yeah. It's, what was the first thing you said, Bruce? It cut out. It's a type of.
I think it's from what I've read, you know, at least of the relative business types, that one probably has the most risk associated with it.
Yeah.
Because,
Risk,
yeah.
yeah, potentially. Although, yeah, I would say that. Although they do have, you know, security systems, but also the proper systems put in place to mitigate those kind of risks.
Yeah,
like,
fire suppression.
yeah, fire suppression, ventilation. But yeah, they're doing more of that type of work, so there is more risk in that type of business.
I'm
So
sorry,
can
I cut off
can-
for a second. Which one are you guys on? My phone totally dropped me off. And I
we're
had
on
to come-
processing facilities.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
So
Yeah.
Salim, the question I have for the processing facilities is, because it says number of licenses to be determined, is that one that the committee was leaning away from? Just
I
curious.
think that's not leaning away, but I guess I think the committee was open to having a processing facility in the city, but we weren't sure if we should limit the license or just let it be unlimited and or limit it to one or two or maybe unlimited. They weren't sure about how many we wanted, or even if we ultimately would be able to support that type of facility because that is a
Right.
decent size
Yeah.
Okay.
of a facility. But you know, it's a business. Like any other business, if they find the space and they want to do it, then maybe we consider it.
Yeah,
so
let
that's
me
what that is.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Salim's correct. So, you know, the biggest concern was the size of the city and whether or not it would actually work. So again, we just made the recommendation and then, you know, took it to council here. So we've just got to, you know, narrow it or finalize it or table it or whatever.
No, I was just wondering, just, you know, when we go through these, what was the recommendation for each one of these from the committee? What was more feasible for Lathrup? So that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking that. And I, you know, and I see that some of these have how many licenses should be with them. So I was just curious, did you even consider the processing facility? And to me, it looks like that wasn't really one that should
Yeah.
be truly considered.
Yeah, I think it's one that we thought is a legitimate business, and we're not opposed to it, but we didn't have a strong feeling that it would fit in the city
Okay.
based on the size of the facility needed.
Yeah.
So
Those are typically more manufacturing oriented.
Okay.
You're gonna have a lot of truck traffic, in and out with deliveries and packaging, storage and materials. There really isn't a zoning area in the city that I think would fit those well.
Okay.
Yep.
So the testing compliance facilities, so those facilities, you know, there's state laws that require that all these products get tested, and they need to be tested by an independent business. So there's these testing and also called safety compliance businesses that do that work. So that's what this type of business would be. So these
Okay.
are pretty high-tech businesses with high-tech equipment in them. They've got pretty, you know, educated employees that do the testing. They have a small amount of product. They take a sample of different products, and that they apply tests to those products to test for purity. I don't know purity, but that there's no bad ingredients in there that shouldn't be in there. That kind of thing. So I think that the committee was pretty in favor of having testing facilities because it's a good business. It's a high tech business. We were told by other cities that, you know, sometimes the people that work there will come and live in your city, and you have, like, you know, good, highly educated people coming into the city, which is always a good thing. So I think the committee was in favor of having these businesses in the city, and they range in size. Some testing facilities are smaller, some are larger. I think from like even 2 to 4,000 square feet. Am I right on that, Ian?
Yeah, you're right about that. Let me just expand on the conversation. So
Yeah.
typically the test lab is testing a range of 60 different chemicals, and that's a standard protocol from the state. Usually they test maybe 5% out of a 15-pound product, so they only get maybe a percentage of that. So it's minuscule. They would not hold product, number one. So if anyone's thinking that marijuana is going to be running through these test labs, that's inaccurate. They take a sampling, or they request the sampling, and then they go through the process. The other plus is that, as Salim stated, so that expertise typically would like to relocate in the city, live in the city, not commute in the city. They would like to be a part of the city, and that, you know, that generates a different kind of, you know, technology and area of expertise within our city.
So let me ask you this about the, oh, go ahead, Bruce, sorry.
Sure. Okay. Scott, I was just going to ask, other cities, where do they, what zone do they typically put their testing facilities? Is that something that normally would go into something like a mixed use?
So I looked, and one example that I came up with was Walled Lake, and theirs is in their light industrial zone. It's again, it's not as an intensive of a use as a processing facility, but there is still product coming in and out, albeit a smaller amount. There are still chemicals on site that. But I haven't done, admittedly, I haven't done a whole lot looking at other communities. But what I did find was that that appears to be the type of zoning district that they're put in. Again, not to say that they couldn't be in an MX district, especially if we held them to higher standards for, you know, material storage, traffic limitations, you know, hazardous material, fire suppression, things like that. So.
Right. So we could do a testing facility, provided we kind of amp it up a little bit. I mean, we don't have any light industrial district.
Yep.
So we'd have to see if it would fit in another zoning classification.
Say that again, please, Celine. What did you just say?
I just said, so we just have to see if we can get it to fit in one of our zoning classifications. So we don't have industrial, right? We don't have that.
So who do they hand this off to? I know you said that it's state mandated and all the high-tech people, high-tech equipment. So does this a place that folk that have licenses come to pick up something, or I mean, what kind of traffic?
There's no traffic.
There's not much traffic. I mean, the product is delivered there at some point, and then it's tested, and then it's I think results get communicated. But there's not much traffic in these places. There's inspections, so the state inspectors would come, and, you know, the testing is done. Somebody has to inspect it and verify that it complies with all the requirements and things like that. So testing, inspections are done on a regular basis.
I guess I'm missing something. So they test.
So the easiest way to explain it is when you send a test out, like if you go to your doctor and you request a test, let's just say they draw blood or whatever, it goes out to a lab. It's the same process here. They're just taking product out to a lab and they're testing it. Same protocol, same procedure. When the test results come back, they notify that company that the lab results are in, and here are the results. Now, if they comply with the results, they don't have an issue. But if you have a violation, then that facility has to either shut down, number one, depending on the state's protocol, or number two, try to, you know, either retest or verify that the test is accurate. So in any case, they still have to wait for the results to come back. So it's just a test lab, just like any other test lab.
Okay, I got it now. I didn't know
Yeah.
if they were testing, product, but they're really testing. I understand. I got it. Thank you for that, Ian.
That business really has no issue of traffic or parking and those kind of things.
Yeah. The only drawback is that if we go down this road is we need to have someone that knows what they're doing. It cannot be a fly by night company that says, "Hey, I want to set up a test lab. I don't know exactly what I'm doing," but you can't have that. You got to have a level of expertise where they have experience, they're willing to bring that experience to the city and set it up, and it has to be ready to go. Can't be like on the job training. We can't have that with test labs.
Okay, thanks. And the
So could you-
suggestion is two licenses for that.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that's what the committee suggested.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's okay. I mean, I kind of agree with that.
Okay.
There's a shortage, I guess, in the state of these testing facilities too. And so I think it's not as profitable for businesses to, I mean, if you're going to get into this industry, a lot of people want to get into the retail part of it to make more money. So there's a shortage, I think, of these testing facilities at this point.
Right. So the drawback, as I stated, you need a level of expertise, number one, and number two, for the city, there's zero excise tax. The only thing you can collect is an application fee. That's it.
Okay.
So those are the drawbacks. They're not very many drawbacks, but you have to make sure that you know what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
So next is on the list are the medical marijuana provisioning centers, and let's do those together. Adult use recreational marijuana provisioning centers. So I think initially the committee said 3, but I agree with some, other people doing just more research and reviewing the notes that we had. I think for us, and maybe this was what you were getting at, Scott, when you were thinking of 2. When you say 2, I think of the adult use. 2 is what I think of. 1 to 2. That's what a lot of cities started out with, and not go overboard on it. But I think 2 would be good for our city. I agree with Ian and everyone else that thinks maybe different locations so we can deal with the parking and the traffic related to those. So that's the issue with those is traffic. There's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of maybe parking issues.
Yeah.
And those are obviously provisioning centers or recreational. You're selling the product. You're selling the finished product. Security is an issue with those. So whoever applies for those, we got to vet them. We got to make sure they have proper security. You have to make sure they have really good business plans and they have a history of success either in this industry or other businesses. We don't want businesses that are going to come here and fail. So I think those are, and I guess what I would think is if we get 2 provisioning centers, we allow recreational and then we have them apply for medical as well.
Right.
I don't think we want to have just a provisioning center that's just medical only. I don't think that benefits us at all.
Yeah.
However, we need to set up those applications and ordinances. I think that's the goal, is to have recreational with medical, but it doesn't do us any good if we just have a medical, because those facilities will end up selling the recreational stuff, but we won't get any tax benefit out of it.
Yeah, zero excise tax. You're right, Salim. The other observation, Scott, is, and we need to talk about the ordinance in regards to licensing. So what a couple of cities saw is that, there would be like a company would come in, get a license, and then try to sell it, in short order. If we're setting this up, we want businesses to be in it for the long haul, not this short-term turnover, because you never get a chance to get to know that owner or whoever's running the business. So there was recommendations that we should make sure they can't turn it over to someone else in short order.
Yeah, it would, I mean, just again, my initial thoughts on this is these licenses are non-transferable.
Okay.
We don't have an obligation like we do with liquor licenses. Once they're issued, the city still retains a lot of control over issuing these licenses. So,
yep.
Yeah, I think that would be an important component that, obviously, you know, we can't, if it's the same company and they have some internal changes, we can't control that, but an outright transfer to a different entity, I think we have some control over that. And that's definitely something that would be included.
So the medical marijuana and the testing facilities, none of them have any money-making provisions for us. Is that right? So neither of them. And then when you say adult use, are you saying which adult, 18 or 21?
Everything's 21.
Yeah, so the recreational is what's considered the adult use. And again, a lot of communities, they will issue, because for a distribution center, they make money off of medical marijuana patients. They make money off of recreational, although again, that may be changing. But what the recommendation often is that if someone gets a recreational license, they have a preference to get a medical license as well, or it's almost a prerequisite. So that's something that we would look at as well. That way, again, it's what Ian's point is, you're getting to know these owners, they're becoming invested in your community. You're not issuing licenses to a bunch of different people. It's you know, one or two individuals that have a vested interest in the community.
Question, Salim and Ian, were you guys recommending, so for provisioning centers and adult use, were you recommending those as separate entities, or as putting together a provisioning center and allowing adult use at the provisioning center?
The latter, yes, together.
Okay, and did you, is there, I'm trying to think of how I want to say
that as like the provisioning centers are, you either have medical provisioning or recreational or adult use, right? But I think we were thinking that, you know, we'd have an adult use provisioning center, but also if we grant an adult use license, recreational license, then they would also we give them a medical, or they should have to apply for a medical license as well. Like Scott was saying, almost a prerequisite.
Right. Well, I guess where I was going with the question was, I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, provisioning centers. Personally, I don't think I have a problem with provisioning centers, but, you know, with use on premises, you know, similar to a bar, for example, you know, that I'd have to think differently about that, because I think there's a whole different set of issues that are associated with, you know, using on premises versus just buying and taking home to use. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we're not thinking about having any kind of business that allows use on the premises.
Right.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. No use on the premises. Actually, every city that we looked at, they don't have that on the ordinance at all.
Okay, I misunderstood your answer, Ian. I thought you said that you were suggesting use on premises.
No use.
Okay.
Zero use on premises.
Is that security that would be necessary to implement the no use? Is that something that would fall to the city or to the person that may or may not have the center, or both? Is that the city's?
No, the security is it's a business's responsibility, and we as a city, I mean, the state already requires certain security measures, and we as a city can supplement that and put whatever measures we think that we want these businesses to have as far as security goes, and put that in our ordinance, and they need to comply with that.
I think her question, I mean, it would be the city's enforcement would be the city's obligation. A condition of their license would be no on-premise use, and if the city were to uncover or discover that they were, you know, giving out free samples or something, then that would be an enforcement from the city's aspect.
If I could ask for a clarification, what I thought I was hearing from the council members is that you want to move forward with language that permits for the adult sales facilities, but not the on-site use. So that would be, you want to continue to opt out of the event organizers, temporary events, and designated consumption establishment license.
Yep, that's
Correct.
correct.
Yeah, the committee did not, we didn't even
Yeah.
go down that road of
Right.
allowing that.
Okay, I just wanted to get that clarification. Thank you.
Yep.
And that's kind of where my thinking was, Cheryl.
Okay, let me also add regarding adult use facilities. When we had our discussion with Chief McKee, we mentioned this, and we also welcome any input from the chief. What we have observed in the other cities is that they do have a level of security depending on the business, right? So some of the security is out front in the parking lot, which it looks kind of ominous. The other security is usually inside the building, but in every case they had surveillance. And so as a city, Lathrop Village, if we wanted to expand outward, because there is a concern that, we've got a interstate running through the city. If we want to maximize the security, we would take Chief McKee's recommendation to expand out the surveillance monitoring. So expanding it out, meaning you would have a camera or two pointing out towards the road, wherever it's going to be, and it would capture some of that traffic. And in addition to that, make sure that the surveillance is within the standard of our police department. We would also, in addition to that, make sure we bring in a chief, or should I say a security consultant, to make sure that we can comply, or if the chief makes a recommendation to make an adjustment, we certainly would make sure that's in the ordinance.
Most of these businesses, the well-run ones, I think we've seen that they have those. They're fine with putting those measures in place. They have
Yep.
cameras that are pointing outward. They have multiple cameras. They want to allow the police and fire to have access to their security footage and feeds and those kind of things. So I think we need to just make sure we know what we want to have and put that in the ordinances. And that's an important factor for these types of for the adult use and medical and retail stores. That's an important factor.
Yeah, Salim's right. What we've seen is that, these facilities, they've gone above and beyond when it comes to security. I mean, if you just take a step back and say, well, the state requires this and you only do that, that may not be enough for Lathrop Village. And in many cases, we've seen other cities that have taken, extraordinary steps to step up their surveillance.
Okay, so we've combined medical marijuana provisioning centers and adult use. The next one is transportation business for secure transport of cash or products.
Yeah, so there's businesses related to transportation. They transport like from one like a processing center to from a grow facility to processing, from processing to the stores, the provisioning centers. So there's businesses that are engaged in that kind of transportation, and also of money too. I mean, the cash from the stores to wherever they deposit them, banks or wherever. So there's businesses that are engaged in transportation. I don't think they need a lot of office space or store space, but they need a place to park their van or truck. Ian, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Typically, when you're talking transportation, we're not talking about semi trucks full of product, right? So when we say transportation, it's usually a storefront with a Sprinter van. That's almost in every case. The other observation is that the product that you're moving, whether it's money or marijuana, typically you would have to work with that provisioning center or adult use center to finalize a pickup or a delivery. So it is a relationship between the two businesses, but it's not a whole, 20 trucks or 20 Sprinter vans. It's usually anywhere from 1 to 3, depending on how much they want to grow their business. And it's never above 5.
So are you saying that the transportation business and the provisioning centers are basically they go hand in hand, or can
No.
the transportation business can be a standalone?
Standalone.
And so then they're transporting, so they're just basically are dispatched to provisioning centers to pick up product and money. So basically it's just a business that it's just a transportation business
Yeah.
that would be on site for Lathrup. And
Yep.
they go to other places, so it's not necessarily bringing it back to Lathrup.
Right. That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
Okay.
The
they-
only,
And we had some interest from a couple, as during our calls and our meetings, some residents seem to be interested in developing those kind of businesses here.
yeah.
Do they keep cash on site? Because if I can remember, that was a security issue because there was, and this may have changed, so forgive me if it has not, but there was no banking regimen or anything, so the cash in the trucks was an issue. Is that still a problem security-wise or no?
No, that is not an issue. They're picking up and dropping off somewhere, so they have to have a destination. They cannot hold product. The only thing I've seen where a truck company or transport company would hold product is during inclement weather, such as a winter snowstorm. That's the only thing I've seen based on the research. They do not hold cash at all. It
Yeah, they don't
cannot
wanna
be a
hold-
holding center.
They don't hold cash at all?
No. And you could write that in the ordinance if you'd like as well. Yeah, I want everyone to understand, like, whatever the city deems as important, we can put it right in the ordinance, and we'd have to vet it through Scott. I mean, if we came up with an idea and say, hey, how about if we can do this? We would have to really make sure it works. We can't just put something in that's not going to work. So we have an opportunity to make it what it should be, a Lathrop Village ordinance, not anything else.
Right. What we're trying to do is just to try to go through these type of businesses first. And then once we figure out exactly what the council comes up with the type of businesses we think will work best. I guess this is just the definition portion of it, just trying to, for all of us to understand which each business is.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the committee was in favor of allowing these type of the transportation businesses, and I think we initially said 2 licenses. There are businesses that we thought were legitimate businesses that would be okay in the city, and so we're in favor of allowing those.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys want to know the downside. The only downside is that you are carrying product from point A to point B. You're not holding
But
product.
is it really a downside for Lathrop? Because you're not really, if it's a transfer, this is how I'm taking it, and correct me if I'm wrong. If it's transportation, if it's transporting, that means that the business location might be in Lathrop, but it's being dispatched to some provisioning center wherever to take it to wherever, but it's not actually bringing it back to Lathrop.
Right. It's not a downside for the city.
Right.
And these communities, they're more of like Kelly just said, like a dispatch center. The downside for Lathrop is that you would have the overnight storage of these transport vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of communities do. These again are located in light industrial zones where overnight storage can be done in a rear yard or someplace that's not. This is a practical difficulty in Lathrop. Where are they? Where are they going to park these vehicles?
Right.
You're not going to be a very profitable transport center if you only have 1 or 2 trucks. I don't know. And just look at, again, quickly looking at some of the other communities and where they're putting them. So those are concerns too that the city's going to have to think about.
Yep.
Okay, so getting back to what Kelly just explained, I think, so whether it's cash or product, it never starts in Lathrup Village. They leave to go get it, and then they deliver it, and then they come back with an empty truck and no cash at night. Is that correct?
That is
Yeah,
correct.
think of it like the bank,
That was
bank
that
trucks,
right?
you know?
Okay.
Well, it's
Um,
right, but unless there's a retail center in Lathrop that they're working with.
Which is possible because
Yeah.
that's one of the licenses that can be held linearly. So you can own a grow facility, a process facility, a distribution center, a transport company. You just can't own same entity, same individuals can't own all. Also own a testing facility. Those have to be independent.
Yep.
Right. So it's possible.
Okay, so the next two is not the next two doesn't sound like it's feasible for Lathrop Village.
No, I think
Us in the woods.
I think the committee, the committee felt that growth facilities. I mean, you need a lot of space. Even micro business, both those, you need a lot of space. You're growing the plants. Really, the committee was not in favor of having those in the city. For one, the size of the facility you needed. Two, that you're gonna have a lot of plants there. We just didn't. The committee didn't want to have those types of facilities. So we were pretty clear on that.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
not enough space.
Okay, so going through those, it looks like, and everybody can chime in, it is either testing compliance facilities, the medical marijuana recreation combined, or transportation. So it's the choice of three.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
and I think we went through some of the concerns for those. So let's kind of focus on those three to see what concerns come up and what needs to be, any anticipated concerns and what needs to be mitigated in those. So we kind of know with the provisioning centers, whether marijuana or recreational, we already saw that the one problem would be traffic, right? I'm just going off of what your report was. So with the testing and the compliance facility, what type of concerns do you see after that, if any?
The only concerns I see on a testing compliance facility is just making sure that they have just the proper measures put in place to account for any chemicals that are on the premises. They have to have proper air filtration system to account for any discharge of whatever smoke that they have that comes out of their testing process. Make sure there's no odors. That's the only thing I see is just making sure that they set up their facility in a way that is not going to give off bad discharge or whatever.
Yeah, like
to the city.
off gassing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's all I see because there's no traffic issue there. There's no really safety issues. I mean they're doing running tests with equipment and things like that, but I haven't heard of any accidents or any risky things like that come out of those facilities.
The only downside one good side, the residents would not even be affected by that. That would be seamless. They would, basically wouldn't know it's in the city. The other downside is that it's not a revenue generating. I don't know if that's what we want to say, or
right.
It's not a benefit to the city for the most part, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like any other business. So I don't think, to me, there's no downside because it shouldn't take away from. If we decide to do an adult use facility, then we do that. This is just another business that we consider.
William, isn't there a licensing fee associated with or application fee associated with those businesses?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the benefit.
Right,
But there's no extra tax. But yeah, there's a licensing fee. Yes.
Right,
and perhaps the size of it.
And then there would be additional revenue from renewals, So it would be a little different than you know,
Regular
a
business,
restaurant that opens up,
Yeah.
but
And,
not
and you
huge.
and you can adjust those license fees too, right? According to what type of business that it would be. Like it could be more for a business that does not bring in extra revenue, additional revenue, I'm sorry. And Scott, also, if I remember correctly, the additional revenue is not as much as we think anyway, right?
That's correct.
So I'm thinking that if there's a huge, you know, if we decide to do this and there's a facility that has to pay a larger sum for a license, may bring in more than a facility that provisions facility or marijuana facility in the end without
Well,
all go
the
ahead.
licensing fees are capped.
Right.
There will be, I mean, a provisioning or a provisioning center, whether is going to ultimately the end is going to generate, you know, it's not going to be, we're not going to use it to pave all the roads in Lathrup, but there will be some revenue that the city gets from that. Again, it's not, I mean, there are going to be additional costs to the city too, as far as enforcement. So it's going to be something that over time, city can weigh as to whether or not it's, but again, that's why my recommendation is maybe start with one or two and make sure that the city is getting the value it anticipates from these licensing fees, shared revenue, before they decide they want to just open up and
Right.
rebrand the commercial corridor.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
it's a percentage of a percentage, right? That
Correct.
comes when it, I mean, it's small, so it would have to make sense.
Well, we'd have to see. I mean, it's
Business.
unclear how much
Yeah,
money is out there that's going to come to the city at this point. I mean,
Say that again.
I said it's
Cecily?
unclear. You know, 'cause those revenues really haven't started being paid out, I don't think, by the state.
Right.
So yeah, it's 10% of sales. It's after other items are paid off, then
Yeah.
you know, the residual gets filtered down to the city. So I don't think anyone's thinking it's some huge windfall, but it's definitely it's extra revenue, we believe, that will outweigh costs. And the other part of it is, along with the license fees and the renewal fees, there's almost always, if the city does it right, some type of special use, I'm going to say tax, but some kind of special use percentage that you can assess, you can charge businesses that they will pay to the city. A lot of these businesses donate to nonprofits within the city, or to the city directly, I think, even for other things that the city may need. So, and I think they're going to do that for the recreational facilities. They're not really going to do that for the testing labs or any of the other businesses. So I think the idea of getting an adult use recreational you know, provisioning center in the city, that's, I'm not saying it's going to be a huge cash windfall, but it's, I think the potential is there to generate some decent revenue.
I just
Yeah, for
remember
me, it's
discussing
not
that prior.
an
We had
issue
that
of.
conversation. Sorry. No, I was saying go ahead, Bruce. I'll come after you. Go ahead.
Okay. No, for me, I was going to say, you know, I don't think the reason to do this is for a cash windfall. You know, as Scott says, we're not going to pave the roads, you know, with this money. But I think there are a lot of other, you know, benefits to doing this. You know, one, Celine just mentioned they do, you know, make donations to, you know, other businesses, do some community types of things. But, you know, it's a way of, I look at it as a way of filling some of our empty buildings with quality businesses. You know, I spend a lot of time in Colorado. I spend about 3 to 4 weeks in Colorado every year, and I go by these businesses all the time. You know, they tend to be very aesthetically pleasing. They tend to have, you know, draw people to that area. And in most of the instances that I've seen, at least in Colorado, you know, you have other businesses that are sprouting up. So this could be a kind of catalyst event for us where, you know, other businesses start locating here and we start filling some of our empty, you know, storefronts to, you know, to support these other businesses. So,
Right.
you know, I'm not looking at this as, personally anyways, as a money generator. It will generate some money and that'll be great because we can use every cent we can get. But I think there's a lot of other substantial benefits to doing something like this for our business corridor.
Yeah, Bruce, you're right. I mean, it's, you know, we're at, if you're looking at the future of Lathrop, right, you've got to be able to understand what it's gonna look like in 10 years, right? And you can't just say, well, this is not gonna work. You know, you got to be able to at least give it a shot, okay? And it's, you know, it's an opportunity basically. So you're gonna have a springboard of other businesses that will want to relocate in Lathrop. And in addition to that, you know, we're really trying to drive the demographic as well. We're not trying to say that we want younger people in Lathrop, but at the same time we want a dynamic of demographics that would, you know, stop in Lathrop, not just at these facilities, but with other businesses that will ultimately spring up. So yeah, it's about the future.
So you're saying that you believe that having we're thinking that having a marijuana facility is gonna it's gonna bring in more businesses because we have a marijuana facility.
One would hope.
Yeah, I
potential
mean,
is there.
that's what every city is banking on. Every city we've spoken to, the
That's their hope.
springboard is to get other businesses interested in that city.
And like what just Bruce said, I mean, fill up the space that's there. That's the
Yeah.
empty spaces that we have in the city. I think other cities have.
Now that sounds like a valid point, but because I've seen, well, we can go on. I mean, I've just seen the facilities spring up in other places, and I haven't necessarily seen any attraction of more businesses to come. But I'm not saying that it can't happen. But I do know that there are empty buildings. But go ahead. I'm just trying to be open-minded, but also put out, you know, what my thoughts are. So please proceed. But when you talk about the vested interest in the community, you're primarily speaking about donating, because I've heard that about 3 times, that there's a vested interest, but it's nothing that they have to do. It's just something that you feel like they would do.
Well,
Scott,
that's,
is social equity required?
yeah, so typically the way
Yeah,
these are set up is it's a point system.
Okay.
That an applicant gets so many points for every, you know, commitment. Are they a resident of Lathrop Village? Yes. Okay, they get 10 points. Are they going to spend $500,000 investment in the infrastructure on the building, repave the alley behind it? Okay, yes, they're going to get 25 points for that. Are they going to sponsor, you know, Bruce's bike ride? You know, no negative points for that. But are they going to make contributions that are beneficial to the community?
To the
And that's
community
something
as
that,
a whole, not,
yeah, to the,
not,
yeah, not to
Not
individual
individuals, right?
council members.
Right.
But to the community as a whole, is there going to be a benefit that's derived? And that's something that when we're structuring this ordinance, those are things, like what you're saying right now, I'm writing this all down. I mean, you want communities, or you want businesses that are going to be committed to the community, someone that's going to, you know, maybe put in some new playground equipment at one of our parks, or commit to repairing some sections of sidewalk in the community that the citizens can benefit and draw a benefit from. We're not just going to issue a license to anyone that's going to come in and put, you know, fancy signage up in their store. We want them to be invested in the community. We want them to invest in that. We want them to own that property. We want them to you know, bring it up to code.
Right.
Repair the wall that's between the adjacent property and you know, the business, all that stuff. That's all going to be built into this, and it's going to be a system where hopefully at the end of the day, when you have these applicants, there's going to be clear applicants that rise above the others based on their level of commitment to the community.
Right. Just one other observation regarding processing facilities. So the plus for processing facilities, the building could be nondescript, meaning it doesn't even need to have a sign on it, right? It doesn't. You're not going to have foot traffic there. Whoever is working there is actually going to just be there. You're not going to have cars pulling up, you know, any
My
given
issue
moment.
with the processing facilities is just the volume of material in and out.
Yeah.
I don't see that working in the city.
Right.
We're talking, you're going to have trucks of semi trucks bringing in material to be processed, and then you're going to have waste material that's not part of the end product that's going to have to be transported and shipped out. It's a lot of late night deliveries and early morning, retrievals. So I don't see that as being a viable. I mean, we'll certainly look into it, but I just don't see any of those that in other communities fall into that industrial or light industrial zoning classification. I see that as a hard fit for our city, simply because right now we don't have any of those businesses, and that's primarily based on the use intensity.
Yep.
Yeah, it really seems like the only two that would really fit would be testing and provisioning. I mean, transportation could fit, but there's not going to be any place where people are, unless they're going to buy an adjacent property to build a garage to store their vehicles. I just don't see transportation working in our community.
I was going to say the same thing, because what is it? You said, Scott, 1 to 3 trucks. One, that's not going to be beneficial to the business. But then 2, we have the issue of trucks being stored, overnight.
Let me correct you guys. Vans, not trucks.
Vans, trucks,
Yeah.
RVs.
Sprinter van. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I just want us to get the dialogue correct. So it would be Sprinter vans, okay?
So thank you for the
Probably
Sprinter
an
vans.
armored vehicle, would be my guess.
Right.
They would be on, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, they would be on property parked until called to do something.
Yes,
Which
that's
means
correct.
that they would be parked, which
Yep.
we already have that issue as an ordinance, so that probably wouldn't work as well for us either.
Right.
As I indicated before, a lot of these larger companies that are getting involved in this, the grow facilities, they hold a license for transport, and it makes sense for them to store their vehicles at their grow facilities, because that's where they're going to have to pick up and leave from. So if they're being stored there, and again, not saying that an independent can't get into this field and can't make a decent go at it, but I think that it's primarily dominated by the larger entities that are linear in their structure.
Right. So if everyone is thinking, okay, testing and provisioning adult use, so the plus of both of those is there's really no smell coming out of those, right? The minus on the adult use medical side obviously is traffic. So how do we mitigate that? On the other side of the testing, like I said, you don't have enough product to even put a dent in anything. So, and there's no traffic there. So
I'm just not convinced that there's no odor coming out of the provision center. I'm just
there's no smoking on premises. So where would you have odor coming out?
Well, I guess I don't. Maybe I don't trust totally.
It's you have to trust it, because it's going to be going to be.
Let me finish. Let me just ask you something, because I mean, and I'm sorry, I'm just speaking from experience. Okay, I'm speaking from driving past places that have these centers that they do smell, and they're not supposed to.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, there's one on. Well, there's been several, but there's one in particular on 6 Mile. It's in Detroit. It's across Evergreen. And there's even one on, well, I don't want to guess. That every now and then, I guess I just need to do some more drive-bys, I guess myself.
So are you positive that the smoke is coming from inside the building, or is it coming from the neighborhood or cars? Because I look at it more or less like the liquor store. You're not supposed to consume liquor on the premises, yet of course, there are some places that people do. I think that when it comes to Lathrup and the patrols that we have, that's probably not going to be as much of an issue, because I believe that we would probably have more of a police presence around whatever, if that's where we go for the provisioning center.
And regardless, it would be a violation of our ordinance because, you know, we have an odor ordinance associated with our businesses, and, you know, it would be something that they could lose their license or their I'm blanking on the term.
Lose their ability
Special
to
land
operate.
use.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Their special land use.
So let me.
I mean, we really haven't seen it come up as a concern from, you know, from talking with all the cities that we've spoken to. That has not been a problem.
Yeah, so Donna raised an example of what not to do. That's why Detroit's having so many issues. And so we have the opportunity to now look at all these ordinances and say, okay, let's see how we can have a measure of success here. So number one, there's no smell coming out of provisioning centers. That is a myth. That's even in Colorado. You can go to Colorado and verify that. And there's no odor coming out of test labs. Now, if someone lives behind a provisioning center that's smoking marijuana, and I think Bruce still has that issue on his block, that's a concern for the person living behind the provisioning center, not the provisioning center. We've not seen any case that would corroborate that statement.
Yeah, so to move the discussion forward, let me throw some, and then people can attack it or agree with it or whatever. I'm going to propose that we recommend to Scott that we look at doing 2 provisioning centers and 2 testing centers.
I would agree with that. And if Scott would allow me to say, okay, if you're going to do 2 provisioning centers, don't let them be in the same area.
So that's when we have to get into we have to get more to the part of how many feet it can be from a school, again, I think we're taking baby steps. And so the first step is kind of what Bruce just threw on the table, to have the 2 provisioning centers and the 2 testing centers, starting there first.
Right. Then we'll get to all the issues. Figure out, you know, what we think we might want to allow, and then figure out what the issues are, so that'll help Scott and Jill for the ordinance.
So
I'm good with that suggestion by Bruce.
I thought Scott had recommended. So we're not really voting on anything. You're just giving him some information so that they can proceed with the ordinance. But I thought Scott recommended 1 of each.
So on the first, for this is our study session. We never take a vote in our study session.
Absolutely.
So this is going to be just for us to be talking it through. So the recommendation was just thrown out for the 2 and 2 for us to have a discussion on what everyone thinks. So it's just a discussion, not a vote.
Right. We're trying to give guidance to Scott.
Say that again, Bruce.
So we're trying to give guidance to Scott so that he can take it to the next phase in the timeline.
And I think that 1 to 2 to start, I think, is probably appropriate. And again, you know, based on some of the other concerns, you know, if we go down the list and we say, okay, there's got to be this much proximity between them, schools, churches, other, you know, liquor stores, or whatever the conditions might be, we might get it done with it and say, okay, well, there's really only space for 2 of these anyway. So, you know, I think that's something I would agree that rather than, I mean, I know that at one point the marijuana subcommittee talked about maybe like 4 or 5, and, you know, to me that just seems aggressive to start off. So I think 1 to 2, you know, with that understanding that probably not to exceed that number would be appropriate.
Go ahead, Ian, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just to clarify. So the subcommittee only recommended 3. We did not go beyond the 3. So yeah, I think we're close to the 2. So I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I like Bruce's suggestion. 2 and 2. I think that's a good idea.
Doing the 2 and 2 is just a suggestion, because by the time you finish with like what Scott was saying, we could screw around and you only have room for really 1 by the time you start saying how far it can be from certain things, because, you know, technically we have everything in the city and it's all close, the schools, the churches, the liquor store. So at this point, City Attorney Scott, we figured out the types of facilities that seem feasible for the city. The next step is for you and Jill to start working on the municipal and zoning code for it.
Yeah, that's the next step. So, I mean, I've gotten already, you guys have already expressed a lot of concerns and issues that potential that you see with this. You know, the one thing I will say to Ian's point about proximity, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because having them close together means it's easier for your law enforcement to police that. If you find a good spot for it, you know, it might work well. They can kind of play off each other with some competition. You look at the Lafayette and American Coney Island are right next door. So maybe we'll get one of those next to it too.
Yeah, I need it.
Every corner that has a CVS has a Walgreens.
I wouldn't open my business. Okay, so.
And then if there's other types of, you know, schools, parks, churches, other types of organizations that you don't want these, and then, you know, it's kind of hard to say residential properties because our entire commercial corridor abuts residential properties, but, you know, I don't know what the council's thought is on that.
Okay.
Well,
So basically we did August, right? For
We're ahead of the game.
Yep. Okay, great. So then
Scott, do you want us to discuss at this point, you know, potential location issues like these? You know, can they be close together? Can they be close to a church? You want us to do that now, or do you have enough to go on?
I think we have enough to get going.
Yeah.
But it's something that I want you to consider and think about. And I mean, you can email me if you have a thought about it and say, hey, I think, you know, I was thinking about this, and you know, I really think it's important that we're at least 1,000 feet away from any church or park or school, or whatever. Or, you know, I was really thinking about this, and I think, you know, traffic is just going to be a nightmare, you know, with the anticipation of a boulevard. How are we going to put this in proximity to a turnaround or whatever, you know, the situation might be.
Right.
So I expect I'll get a lot of emails from you, Bruce, with
No, actually, I don't have.
You'll be getting some from me for sure.
Well, one thing that I was going to ask you is that based off of, you have some ordinances, I'm assuming that both Salim and Ian have, and you probably have it too from Wall Lake, an idea or an example of the ordinances for how far away from a church and schools and things like that, right?
Yeah, and it's different, obviously. You know, those communities are laid out a lot different than Lathrup.
Right.
So we do have ordinances in place right now for our liquor stores that we can use as a basis, but
Okay.
it's, you know, and that's something too that I think probably weigh in with Chief McKee. So.
Yeah, are there any distance requirements right now, things like that for liquor stores?
I think it's 1,000 feet from a church or school.
Okay. So just to make sure we're wrapping this up, is that we've expressed what if in fact we are going to agree to bring a marijuana business here, that we gave you the two, which is going to be the testing and the provisioning centers, and then you'll work on the ordinance and what that looks like, and we will bring that back before council on the next, because basically marijuana is going to be on every single meeting going forward, both study sessions and our meeting. And so, you know, just so make sure that we're moving forward. So I guess that the next one, the expectation is just to have like a little sample and feedback from council of what they want the ordinances to look for, because that will also give everyone on council an opportunity to look at examples from other ordinances from whatever cities. And also, I think, didn't you put that in your package too, Salim? I think there was an example that might have been sent out, or am I making this totally up? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry.
I think there was an example, maybe that was sent out, but I don't think it's included in our ordinance or in our packet right now.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
we
No,
definitely
it's not
have
in this
that.
packet. I mean, the one that you sent out
Yeah,
before.
no, I don't even think it's in that. I don't think
Okay.
we linked ordinances from other cities at this point, but we have some of them already, and we have access. We have connections with the other city, administrators and mayors, et cetera, that we can get them. We have a number of them already. They're not necessarily like on our site though right now. But we
Okay,
can
well,
get
can you
get 'em.
do this, and maybe if you or Ian or anybody has an example of maybe a couple of ordinances
Yep.
that you can send to Cheryl, and then Cheryl can send it to all of council?
Yep.
Yep,
Sure.
no problem.
That would be appreciated. Can I ask a quick question too? And this just came up. Was there any instances where the cities were afraid of maybe losing any type of businesses because of marijuana facilities, or they totally were not concerned with that?
Did not come up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it didn't really come up. I mean, I'm sure they they thought about that before voting.
Okay, that's gonna be, okay. Got it. Thank you.
So, I think we're good with marijuana. Anything else about it?
No.
Okay, so next one, we have the sign ordinance update. City manager.
Wow, I thought everyone was looking at me.
Well, one, as you already know, Scott and Jill were working on the ordinance relative to the signage, but after some residents were contacted relative to the placement of their signs, it seemed like a good time to just have a discussion around it.
So the one thing that I think that a lot of people got confused about is that one, if the sign is between the street and the sidewalk, it needs to be moved. That's the one that needs to be moved immediately, or the sign will be, removed for them or whatever. The other issue is the fact about the signs that are on your personal property, the expressive signs that have been out for more than 90 days. So the first one absolutely can be enforced immediately, and I think that that's what Rami was doing, was enforcing the ones that are in the right of way. And then the second one just seemed to spring legs on its own and kind of took off from that.
Yeah,
Gotta love villagers. Yeah, I mean, I guess
190 comments.
yeah. What I'd like to propose, I mean, I know we talked about this a year and a half ago because I had brought it up based on some resident concerns, but we had talked about the 90 days wasn't really enforceable, similar to the same way, when these people who park their cars and they don't move, then we can't really enforce it very easily. So what I'd like to propose, or at least hear from Scott about, is whether or not we can just modify the ordinance to take the 90 days out, because there just seemed to be a lot of confusion and vitriol going on back and forth about the fact that it was 90 days, and people were it just got out of hand, and I don't really, unless you see a reason for us to keep the 90-day limit, which I'm guessing, and again, this is a question for you, Scott, wouldn't even hold up, because even though we're allowing expressive signs, putting a limit on it seems like you're putting a limit on First Amendment rights.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I don't know that would stand up. So I just interested in your comments, Scott.
Yeah. So it is, you're absolutely right. We did talk about this over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago. And I think at that time, what I had said was, it's just like what you said. It's virtually impossible to enforce this ordinance. It is constitutional. There are time, place, manner restrictions that can be put on there. However, there's been a shift, and it's right around the time we talked about it, actually, that they're more enforceable if they're related to a specific event. So an example would be campaign signs. 28 days after the election, those have to come down, and it's a balance of aesthetics and how your community looks, and you don't want it to be cluttered with temporary signs. But again, the expressive signs, and that's why we had that discussion, and the directive was kind of given to Jim at the time. Not okay. There's no way to enforce it. Don't even bother writing tickets for signs on private property that are constitutional free speech. So, and I think just Rami didn't get the memo on that. He knew he saw it in the ordinance and just said, okay, we got to take it down. So, and actually, as I guess it's good, it reignited a fire under Jill and I's butt about this. So we had already exchanged a couple draft versions of revisions, and ironically enough, that we completely removed any reference to expressive signs from the new proposed ordinance out, and we also took out the 90-day. And the only restriction time-wise on signage is event specific. So, and there's cases that came out 2017, 2018. That's specifically said. You can put time restrictions on there, but they have to be consistent. So if you're going to give 7 days for your garage sales signs to come down, you're going to give 7 days for your political signs to come down. So, but the language we have right now is 28 days is what we're proposing. A reasonable amount of time to get all the signs down, maybe a little bit on the high side, but I think 28 certainly works. And again, the expressive signs, as long as they're not in the public right of way or on public property, there's really no limitation on those. So, and I don't think it's got out of hand. I don't know. I mean, I think it still looks good. I mean,
I don't think
it's nobody has like 40 of them on their front yard or anything like pink flamingos or something. So.
Does the new ordinance that you guys have been talking about, does it include, like right now, essentially most of these signs are 2 by 3, so they're 6 square feet, so you're really limited to 4.
Yeah.
Is there still verbiage in the new ordinance similar to that?
There's a limitation on the size and the total size, so you can't get overboard with them. So.
Yeah.
Right.
So you are working on it. It is going to be changed. We kind of knew that it was not enforceable. I was just trying not to use those words written, but I knew it was not. So, and then, and I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but just know that expressive signs can go both ways of expressing how you feel about things. So, just know that and be prepared for that, I guess, too. So, the next meeting, I know I'm putting a lot on your plate, but, I was gonna say it was your fault anyway, but I won't say that. Oh, I kind of did. But anyway, just kidding, Scott.
No, we did talk about it, and it's going to be on the next Planning Commission agenda, which I think is the 17th. So it's something, because we do want to get originally the sign ordinance was part of the zoning ordinance, and then it was moved to the police power ordinance. So we do still want feedback from Planning Commission. So they're going to see that first draft, probably have them make a recommendation to City Council. So I would guess probably September. I think maybe September Council will see it, maybe October at the latest.
Okay.
Sounds good.
But it does include other things that Council's asked for, including the light intensity and some of the other things that have come up. So.
Yep.
Okay. That was painless. So it looks like that we are down to mayor and council comments. Anyone have any comments? Dr. Shirley, that someone's been calling me and calling you that, and it just cracks me up. So
Sure.
Dr. Shirley.
Well, I just want to mention a couple of things. One, the recreation van that we had on order arrived today, so we're really excited about that and looking forward to being able to transport people to events when we can start gathering together again. City Hall will be closed. Tomorrow is Election Day, August 4th. And so the administrative offices will be closed. However, the only activity on our side will be the election itself. And the election is from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's a different setup this time to promote social distancing to the extent that we can. So precinct 1 will be entering in and exiting on one side of the building, and precinct 2 will be entirely on the other side of the building. So those precautions have already been put in place. There are shields, as well as the face coverings and hand sanitizer will be plentiful. So our clerk has done a tremendous job in trying to make certain that the site is ready for the residents who want to come out and vote.
So I have a question about the, I know that the van has to get the signs and the, get wrapped basically to say Lathrup Village. The truck that Rami uses,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to get some
Already
signage?
on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
What's
I can
the
delete my draft email.
what's the quick question on the van? So you guys have in place social distancing when having requirements for the total capacity of the van now?
We're
We
not
haven't,
using it yet.
right.
Have you thought about how you're going to implement that?
Not extensively. It's large enough that people can be separated to some degree. You would essentially have half the capacity of the of a 15 passenger vehicle. But
Yeah.
we don't know what's going to be the constraints relative to social distancing next week, let alone 3 months from now.
Because we don't have any recreation programs going on anyway at this point. So I
Yeah.
don't think we've gotten that far.
Okay.
Sorry, Cheryl, go on.
I'm sorry, how large is the van? What seater?
15 seat.
Very nice.
So we're gonna have our final, which it's funny, I'm glad that she sent me the email today. Final food drive is Saturday, the 8th, from 11 to 2. If you can volunteer, that's wonderful. The one thing that I'm seeing for the volunteers is if you come, we need volunteers in the morning, but then what happens if people come like at 10:30, they fall off roughly around noon, and then we don't have a lot of people towards the later in the afternoon. So I'm sorry, I was looking at a question that came up. Anyway, so yeah, if you could come, if you want to volunteer, just let me know. But yeah, that'll be our last food truck. I think that's the last food truck for the area unless some things change. I believe I have to finish reading my email. Things could be changing depending on what's going on with the federal government.
Is that at City Hall?
Pardon me?
Is that at City Hall or over at
Yes.
Michigan First?
It's going to be at City Hall.
Okay.
So anybody that can, help, that'll be absolutely great. It looks like we have a question from Perry McNeil.
Are we done with council comments yet or no?
No, I'm sorry. Perry will be with you 1 second. Sorry. Go ahead, Bruce.
A couple of things, just from an infrastructure perspective, beginning to work on the education campaign. We had the Fix LV Roads website that we had for the last election. So tomorrow I have a call with Cassie over at Giffords and Webster, who set it up last time, and just to update it with the new documents, put some new verbiage out there. We'll have the same point and click map that we had last time, where you can click on it and resident can find out exactly what their costs will be. So we'll be working on that and hopefully getting that getting it updated in the next couple of weeks. And then I guess the other question, Donna, what happened at the SEMCOG meeting last week? Do you have an update?
You're on mute.
You're on mute if you're talking.
Crickets. Are you there?
That's That's all I had.
Hello?
Yep,
Are you there?
Hello?
we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my phone is going like in and out and in and out and in and out. But the only thing that I had to report from SIMCOG, the meeting I did not make last week. I was not well, but there is, they are having an amazing Great Lake water, not a contest, but where they're going to begin a huge undertaking to talk about the water around Michigan. And I was going to actually send that to Dr. Sherrill so that she could send that out to the residents if they wanted to participate on it. And I'll just give a better update, a different update, I should say, at our next meeting regarding SIMCOG. Okay, thank you.
Was that at the SEMCOG meeting, the water update?
No, I actually got a call and then they sent an email. I'll forward the email to you guys.
Okay, but you don't have an update on the meeting, on the SEMCOG meeting?
No, I'll give you one next week. I did not make it last week.
Isn't there a backup
I
though?
was not well.
Hello?
Hello?
I know we used to have a backup. It was Dan before he left. Is Cheryl the backup?
Cheryl is my backup.
Oh, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anything else from the council?
Just
go ahead, Ian. You're probably going to answer.
no, go ahead and finish.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Just a quick question for Cheryl. Any updates on the wall? Are they still working out, finalizing the second layer?
I don't have any information from the last email that I sent out.
Okay, all right. I'll circle back with you. My last question is for Scott. So Scott Baker. So if you have a vehicle that has an updated tag but hasn't moved in a couple of years, is that vehicle still a valid vehicle to not ticket and or tow? Not that we're in the towing business, but
If it has valid plates on it
and it has like two flat tires.
Okay, so if it has flat tires, it hasn't moved, it has trees growing out of the trunk, then no, that would be considered an inoperable vehicle.
Right.
They have to be operable in order to be parked. So
Okay, so
outside, otherwise you can put those in the garage if you want to.
okay, so even if it's a vintage vehicle, because that's the same issue I'm bringing up again regarding the last C-click fix that was about.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a classic car or a brand new car. If it's inoperable, it can't be stored in the exterior of the property.
Okay, so what are the next steps for us to do anything?
Code enforcement. I mean, they would send a notice to have it either, again, moved indoors or made operable. And if that doesn't, if that doesn't happen, then a citation will be issued. But I explained to Bruce, I think in an email, right now the court's really not processing any municipal civil infraction tickets. So everything is being adjourned out September, October. So what normally would happen is if the individual came to court, we would give them to the next court date 2 weeks to get the vehicle either removed at their own expense or get it repaired and operational again. And if not, then the city gets an order to go onto the property and remove the vehicle and then assess those costs back to the property owner. But because the court's not conducting any in-person court, we're not able to do that. That corrective action is not happening. So there's a big lag in terms of when the citation's issued and when the enforcement comes. So, the issue Bruce was having with the trash haulers coming outside of the approved hours, it may be months before they start seeing an escalating fine schedule take effect. So what I've been encouraging code enforcement officers is to try to make contact with these individuals, let them know what the issues are and try to achieve compliance that way, short of writing citations.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'll just send Cheryl, I'll just send you a text on the address. It's the same C-click fix that's, it was updated with a new plate, but that car hasn't moved in 3-4 years or so. All right, that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay. So we're gonna, any other questions or statements from council?
I'll hold my question until next time. I'll call. I did have another one, but I'll hold it. So we can move on.
Okay, so there is a question from attendee. Rami visited me a couple weeks ago and was unhappy about my, I'm sorry, Boswell and the trench. Huh?
Bioswale.
Thank you. A few years ago, the city was very supportive of vegetation in the trench. Has the city's position changed on this?
If I could respond, and I'm not certain what the instructions were to residents some years ago, because I think that preceded me. But I know the thinking in regards to the plantings is that they should be on the side of the ditches. They should not be in the ditches because they actually are obstructing the flow of water. So when we have those obstructions and we get lots of complaints about them, he was responding.
That's going to be an interesting conversation because as I was going through our neighborhood this weekend, I see a lot of rain gardens that are in the ditches.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bruce.
I was just going to say, historically, I think it was about 8 to 10 years ago. I don't have my notes in front of me from the infrastructure committee, but the city was encouraging them as a way of helping the ditch system in terms of some of the water getting reused by the vegetation as opposed to filling up our tank down on 11 and Evergreen. But the issue that we've run across is a lot of these rain gardens were done incorrectly. Like Cheryl said, they just kind of threw plants in the ditch. A lot of people put materials in their ditch they weren't the right materials. Now a lot of people did them right, and the water's flowing and so forth. And that's why in the recommendation that we made, the infrastructure committee made to council about the ditch. The ditching aspect of the proposal, both last November and in the one that we just approved to go on the ballot now, is that'll be an administrative decision on a case-by-case basis. So, if we come to do a ditching project on a street and you've got a rain garden that is impeding the flow and not working the way a rain garden is supposed to work, then it's going to be the residents' responsibility to remove it before they do the grading work, and then they can either put it back in correctly, put it back in properly, or alternatively, if it's not impeding the flow, then they won't need to do anything. So because it's so varied, we couldn't come up with a one size fits all solution to the rain garden, so we made it an administrative decision. So Cheryl and her team would have to evaluate and make the decision on each of those individual instances.
So to answer that question is, nothing has changed thus far.
Right. So yeah, I guess to some degree, I guess it has changed because 8 to 10 years ago, we were encouraging people to do that.
Right.
And now we're not encouraging people to do that because, so many of them were done incorrectly that, the water is the flow is being inhibited as opposed to, having less water because the rain garden was implemented correctly.
And to continue with the question, how do you know if the flow is being impeded?
Well, that's probably a question for the engineers, but a lot of times you'll know because you can see that the water is backing up at that rain garden. It's not flowing on to the next house, that's lower, in the appropriate direction. So a lot of times you can just see it by looking at like you said, as you drive around and look at the ditches after a rain, you can see where they're
it's impeded.
where the flow is being impeded or slowed. So
And give
you
it
know,
a
in some
minute.
cases,
The way the rain sounds, just give it a minute and you'll be able to go outside and
exactly.
figure it out yourself.
But you know, I mean, you know, in some instances, you know, we may, you know, as we get into the road project, if it's approved, you know, we may have to get the city engineer to take a look, you know, to you know, determine, you know, it may not be something that's easy to figure out in every instance, but we know it's going to be a little bit of a headache, Cheryl's headache. No offense, Cheryl, but yeah, it is what it is.
Thank you. Looks like I hope we answered the question. I know it's kind of a roundabout way of answering it. I think that's it. Just to do a summary, next meeting, we will have the beginning of the ordinance, of what that looks like for marijuana. The sign ordinance will be going to the planning commission on August 17th. Have a follow-up for, was it SIMCOG, I think? And then I think that's all that we have. Is that right, Dr. Shirley?
There's a second reading of an ordinance. What was that, the fireworks?
Oh, and
Fireworks.
about the fireworks, thank you. Again, I saw it on Villager that I don't hear the fireworks at night. It looks like it's more south of 696. But I encourage, if you hear them when it happens, call the non-emergency number immediately at that time. So it could be a possibility that our police officers can respond quicker to find out who is still doing fireworks. Just a reiteration of that. And I'm sorry for interrupting you, Scott.
I was just saying, there's the fireworks second reading, and then there's a second reading of the opt-out with the extended sunset.
Okay. All right. Well, you all have a good evening. If you haven't already exercised your right to vote, please make sure that you do tomorrow. Don't forget that that the city hall is closed tomorrow. So if you really don't have any major pressing business besides voting, it's probably best just not to go up there, just so we can really adhere to the social distancing. So,
Anybody running that we know?
nope, because I'm not gonna even go down that. I'm not going down that road, so someone can call and complain nope. So look at your ballot. Might be someone familiar.
I would like to just add that the drop box outside of the police station is open in case someone wants to drop off a water bill or other payment. They can still do that tomorrow.
Can they put their absentee ballots in there?
I would recommend, they can. I would recommend bringing it to inside to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Hey,
thank you all.
Ian, can one other thing that I'd like to hear more about too, because and I know it's going to be predicated on what the government says, but just the school board meeting, whatever's going on there, if we could talk a little more about that next time too. Okay, because I've been, parents have been wondering what the heck, and I know that's not our jurisdiction, but they're asking me what schools are going to do, and I know that's.
Well, it's was in the paper. The schools are going to be doing online.
They're going to be going online. Is there? They were asked. Okay. I know they're going to do online. Are there going to be any parental? From what I understand, there was discussion about some level of parental help to make sure the students were, parents had more support. They went crazy. But anyway, I'll look into that. I'll look into the school board. And then,
well, actually, Ian dropped. Ian is on that particular committee, so I will.
Oh, I know he is. But you were saying it like it was already decided, so I didn't want to push it. I know he is. That's why I.
It's already decided that they're doing online. The only city, my understanding, that is going to have face-to-face is Detroit, and I think Birmingham is the other one. Is that right? I thought I read something about Birmingham. I'm not sure. But my answer to you was that maybe if Ian was on here, he can answer it for you because he's the person that is supposed to be working with the school district. But looks like he dropped. So
Oh, he dropped off. Okay, yeah.
All right.
Wonderful.
So
Thank you.
everyone, thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and we will
too.
talk 2 weeks from now.
Great voting. All right, great voting, everybody.